Welcome! In this video we're going to be taking a quick look at Sid Rainer, an epic grade tank class Elune. Looking at his base stats at his 6-star level 60, they're pretty decent for an epic grade at 46k HP and 5.4k PDEF, 5k MDEF. His attack speed at 105 does make him decently quick, but not too fast, as typical with most tanks. As he is transcended up to the max at +5, his HP does go up to a very nice 69.6k with his PDEF and MDEF ending at 8.1 and 7.5, making him somewhat easy to make tanky. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at his skill. His first skill is a 15-hit, multi-hit, single-target, frontline only physical damage skill. As typical with most of the frontline skills and first skills, they're frontline only and they're just a do nothing else. This is 15 hits though, so you might need to be careful about who you target with this one, as you can run into some problems with the multi-hits. As the skill is leveled up, the damage does go up a little bit, but this is not primarily going to be a damage dealer, so don't expect this thing to do too much damage. Therefore, putting skill ups into this should not be a priority. Looking at his skill gem set bonuses for this one, the red, orange is going to be physical attack and crit rate. The bonus you get out of this is a 5% chance of reducing the target's physical defense by 10% for 2 turns. As this skill really doesn't do anything else, you can go with the skill gem set effect and just have that 5% chance of doing something. Even though some type of CC would be better, at least the skill does something if you do gem this up, so might as well do it, as the skill is pretty useless otherwise. Looking at his special skill, this one is a buff for himself. It's a self buff only, taking 2 souls as typical with most self buffs. This skill starting off gives him a heal by 10% of his HP, and then increases his physical defense by 10% of his max HP for 3 turns. This makes him a lot tankier to physical defense, which could make him a decent tank for hard-hitting physical damage dealers. As the skill is transcended up, the heal that he does to himself goes up to a 20% heal, which is pretty decent, and the physical defense increase is also 20% of his max HP, which can be quite significant because his max HP is pretty decent as it is. This goes up to 4 turns too, so that it lasts for a while, so you don't have to spam it unless you're wanting it for the heal. The skill gem set bonus on this one is yellow violet, which means it increases the amount of the buff that it gives from the yellow, and the violet increases his speed. The skill gem set effect though is a 5% chance of increasing max HP for 10% by 10% for 2 turns. As this is such a low chance, going with a full yellow set of skill gems would probably be a better option for him, just to increase that base PDEF that he gets, that increase to the PDEF that he gets as a guaranteed option, instead of just an extra increase in HP, not a heal. Looking at his ultimate skill, this one again is a self buff only, meaning that his only damaging skill is his first skill, but this skill does do another buff. This one is a soul effect buff though. This soul effect increases his attack by 50% of his physical defense, and then reduces the physical damage received by 10% of his max HP for 3 turns. What this means is that anything that does less than 10% of his max HP as damage per hit means it will be reduced to 0. So if you're using him to fight multi-hitting physical damage dealers, such as maybe a McCarthy, or even in some cases a Balder, or anything that just does multi-hit physical damage, as long as it's not doing high damage, it will just be reduced to 0, so he won't take any damage at all. Now, single target physical damage dealers will just have the damage reduced, but since it's a single hit, it's typically going to be a lot stronger, so the damage will just be reduced. This is at level 1 of this skill. This does increase his attack, but it still doesn't make him a very good damage dealer. When the skill is leveled up to the max at +6, the increase that it gets is a 70% of his physical defense added on to his attack, which can be quite good because his physical defense is high, but it still is not enough to make him a good damage dealer, as he can only attack front line, and he only has the 1 attack skill. This also reduces the physical damage received by 20% of his max HP for 4 turns, so this does last for quite a while. It is a soul effect, so it can't be removed. This makes him very tanky to physical damage. Now, magic damage still is going to go straight through him, so you're going to have to be careful watching for any magic damage dealers if you're using him as a tank. This just makes him a really good physical damage tank as it reduces. So if you get him with really high HP, then it's going to be much more difficult for those multi-hitting physical damage dealers to get through his HP, or to get through this buff that he gives himself to be able to do any damage to him, as it's 20% of his max HP. This can be pretty good, especially when combined with him having really high base HP for an epic, plus plus higher than normal physical defense. If you stack him with a lot of physical defense, he can be used as a good physical damage tank against certain things. So depending on who you're fighting, if you get him enough, this can be somewhat helpful. For example, if you get him with, say, 100k HP, then 20% of that is going to be 20k of his HP. So that means that they would have to do more than 20k HP damage to him before he takes any damage. So if you have him with, say, 100k HP, this skill goes up, it's going to be hard even for things like Artemiel to be able to do damage to him, since Artemiel is a multi-hit skill. Unless the Artemiel is doing more than 20k damage per hit, he won't take any damage at all. And even if the Artemiel is doing more than 20k HP per hit, it reduces 20k off of each hit, making him really good for tanking out those Artemiels, because he's not going to take hardly any damage. Unfortunately, though, he doesn't have any provoke skills, so he doesn't have a skill to be able to provoke things onto him. Now, look, the skill gem set on this one is a yellow violent. Again, this is probably going to be the skill gems that you're not going to go with. The 10% chance of becoming immune to all damage for 1 turn sounds nice, but it's a 10% chance, so it's pretty low. Going with yellow is going to be better, because it's going to increase the effectiveness of these buffs that it gives. So you're going to be much better off going with just a yellow set than violent. But however, if you want to go with the violent just for the chance of being immune to all damage, you can, but it's just kind of hit or miss. If you're going to get it, mostly miss. Alright, going into the first passive, this one ignores physical damage that is less than 5% of his max HP. So if it's less than that, it just doesn't even bother with it. It's just 0, so doesn't even care about it if it's less than that. So anything that does multi-hit physical damage skills is just going to be, if it's less than 5% of his max HP, so in the case of him having 100k, if it's less than 5k per hit, it's just going to be 0. So if you're fighting heavy physical damage dealers on a team, then going with Sid Rainer would be a good option, because he can just basically take no damage. Between his passive and his ultimate, he can pretty much just take no damage at all. His second passive, what this one does, his physical defense increases by 10% for each buff in effect for the user, excluding PDF buffs. So anytime that you give him a buff that's not a physical defense buff itself, then he gets another 10% PDAF to it. So this just increases his PDAF anymore, making him tankier to physical damage. So it makes it harder for people to do physical damage to him, or large amounts of physical damage to him. So that's pretty good for him. It just makes him tankier to makes his physical defense higher, tankier to physical damage. So it's just harder to kill him. But that's about all this buff does, and you'd need to buff him in some way to do that. The third passive, this increases his resist rate of all status effects by 1% for each 1% of HP that he loses. So as his HP decreases, he becomes more resistant to status effects, as his HP goes down. He starts off by, of course, not having any of this bonus resistance because he's at 100% HP. So he's had no HP lost, which means this doesn't take into effect. So if he's at 50% HP, then he has a 50% resist rate, which means it's going to be a lot harder as he gets lower on HP. It's going to get harder and harder for the enemy team to be able to do any type of status effects to him. So that's decent, but it's not like great, because you can just use other things to either cleanse him or give him higher resistance anyway. So this effect, it could be a lot better, but unfortunately it's just the way that it is doesn't make it too overwhelming for him. It actually is pretty underwhelming for him in this case. This effect could be a lot better if it was just changed a little bit. Say like if it was a 2% increase to resistance for every 1% loss. That way he gets up to 100% resist at 50% HP loss. That would make him a lot stronger of a tank, because then it would be basically once he hits 50% HP and lower, then he's at max resist. So it's going to be really hard for anybody to do anything to him. So at least then it would be a little bit better. But as it is, it's decent, but it's not amazing. So overall, Sid Rainer is just going to be, he's a really good physical damage tank, but that's about it. He doesn't do anything else. He can't, and it's something that you're going to have to use and hope that they attack him. So if you're fighting a team that does that can target backline with their skills, or that does lots of AoEs or anything like that, then he's not as good of a tank, because he has no control or no aggro or no, just nothing to provoke or taunt the enemy team, anybody to attack him. So like, even if you try to use him as an Artemiel tank, the Artemiel can attack anything that it wants to when it attacks. It doesn't have to attack front lines. So in a lot of cases, the Artemiels will target the backline DPS. So you're just running a chance. If you use him as an Artemiel tank and then you put squishies in the back to do damage, they're probably just going to be killed by the Artemiel anyway, because Sid doesn't have a way to control the Artemiel and provoke him onto him so that he's the focus of attacks. So it's in that kind of regard, it would be better if he had some type of control or provoke or something with one of his self buffs that provokes, so that way he would have at least some kind of control over the enemy team. But without it, it's just more of a he's a really good physical damage tank where he can take almost no damage, but without people being forced or focused onto him, it doesn't really matter how tanky he is. So overall, he can be useful, he can be decent, he can be okay for certain situations, but for the most part, he's not going to be that great or amazing for anything. His buffs are only self, so they don't help the rest of the team. So it's just going to be for him. His damage is pretty low, even when buffed up, it's pretty low. So anyway, not the best tank out there. So I would look for other options for most cases. But if you have him and you've built him, he still can be useful for certain things. Just for most things, he's not going to be that useful. So anyway, that's going to be it for this one. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and I'll answer them as soon as I can. Thank you.